Today I'd like to continue our discussion of chapter 8 of the book of Judges. We've been talking about the story of Gideon and how Gideon's army was reduced, but that did not stop him. Even though he went from 22,000 men to 10,000 and then eventually only 300, Gideon still did very well, and the Midianites are on the run. So Gideon is pursuing them here in the beginning of chapter 8. He's pursuing Zebah and Zalmunna, who were the two kings of Midian. He didn't get too much cooperation from the princes of Succoth and Penuel. They refused, but Gideon persisted. He went on anyway. And he took the two kings of the Midianites captive. And as frequently happens, when you really take out the leadership and you hold the leadership captive, everyone else gets discombobulated and they start running in different directions. We don't have any leaders. And so that was the situation here with Gideon and the Midianites. So he has these two kings. The army of the Midianites is really thrown into panic now. And Gideon decides that he will take revenge on the men of Succoth and Penuel because they didn't help him. They had the opportunity to provide some food for his troops. They didn't do that. So Gideon, he remembers it. He told them he would take vengeance, and he does. Even though they were Israelites, they did not support him, which shows an interesting characteristic in the book of Judges. We would think sometimes, well, if they're Israelites, Gideon could kind of give them a pass. After all, they're part of the same religious grouping. They might be from a different tribe, but yet they're still part of the body of the Israelites. Why not say, well, we understand you didn't want to give us food, it's okay. But no, whether you were an Israelite, whether you were a Canaanite, if you didn't act in the proper way, if you didn't give the support when you should, you were liable for vengeance. So Gideon takes revenge on them. Then Gideon decides he will kill Zebah and Zalmunna because his son Jether was still a boy. He asked his son to do it, but his son was really too young at this point, and he refused. So Gideon did it himself. And then he took the crescents that were on the necks of their camels. So not only did he kill them, yet he took some booty from the camels. The Israelites asked Gideon to rule over them. Now he has conquered the Midianites. He did it in tremendous fashion with very few men. Didn't have that many casualties. He has captured the kings of the Midianites. He has killed them. So they're like, wow, Gideon, you're a good candidate for king. You know, you've really been successful here. You've helped us defeat the Midianites. Now we can live in peace. Why don't you be our king? And it seemed like a logical choice, a good choice to be king. But Gideon refuses. Gideon says, no, I'm not going to be your king. And the reason he gives is very interesting. Gideon says that God should rule over the people. They should not have a king as such. They should always listen to what God wants. And Gideon was really a good model for that because he listened to God. He even kind of had that little test with God, and God sort of passed the test. But yet he put his trust in God, and God asked him to do some pretty outrageous things when you look back. Reducing your army, what's that all about? Taking these glass jars and these horns and doing all this stuff. I mean, this is very unusual for God to ask this of Gideon. But he follows what God had told him. So what he's really trying to model for the people is that don't think of the leader as somebody who can replace God. But what we have to do in all the decisions we make about our people, we have to first be people of prayer. We have to turn to God. We have to ask ourselves, what would God want us to do in this situation? What is the right thing to do? So Gideon refuses this. And of course, he could have become wealthier if he had become king. He could have demanded money, tribute, and really could have put himself and his family in a way in a better position economically. But Gideon refuses that. He has a higher purpose in mind. He wants to follow God. So again, a good lesson for us. Are we listening to God? Do we follow sometimes too much the political leader and put all our energy and focus there, and not so much on what God would want us to do? So Gideon says, no, you have to put God first. So I will not be your king. Gideon then requested that the Israelites give him rings from their booty. He had this request that they had a lot of booty that they picked up on the various battles and encounters. And there were many rings involved, so Gideon asked for those. And since the enemy were Ishmaelites, they had gold rings. They were noted for their gold jewelry and their gold rings. They said that they would give Gideon the gold rings, and the rings weighed 1,700 gold shekels. So there was quite a large amount of gold involved in that. Gideon then made an ephod out of the gold and placed it in his city of Ophrah. An ephod was part of the priestly attire and also an instrument of discerning the divine will. It was frequently, though, connected with idols. So there was Gideon on the one hand, turning to God, but on the other, there's some suspicion here that is he involved in the worship of idols? And so this became a problem because all Israel paid idolatrous homage to it there. So there's Gideon on the one hand doing what is right, turning to God, but then on the other hand, creating this idol that the people came to worship because, again, Gideon was so successful. So there was peace now in the land for 40 years. So a good chunk of time there was this peace. But we see this conflict even within Gideon between worshiping God and worshiping the idols. But the people are happy. They have peace in the land, and Gideon has accomplished that for them. So the people feel very good about Gideon and what Gideon has done.